This is the lecture for Chapter 8, Building Collaborative Relationships with Team Members from Diverse Populations and Contexts. Upon completion of reading Chapter 8 and listening to the lecture, you will be able to demonstrate the following learning objectives. 1, you'll be able to explain the impact of the multiple aspects of diversity and educational consultations and collaboration. Next, we'll look at ways to develop diversity-related competencies for collaborating consultants. We'll also develop an awareness of strategies for collaborating with team members from categorically diverse populations. Next, we'll develop an awareness of strategies for collaborating with team members from diverse contexts. We'll also describe the social justice framework for consultation, collaboration, and teamwork. And finally, you will be able to justify having a social justice perspective as a collaborative school consultant. Understanding individual characteristics and group cultures in a diverse melting pot, such as Houston, is not an easy undertaking. Consider the following facts and figures as reasons why I am proud to call Houston home. Houston now has the third largest Hispanic population in the United States. Here in Houston, we also have a significant African American population, which has been the case for most of history. In fact, from 1870 to 1890, African Americans accounted for nearly 40% of the city's population, although this generally ranged from 21 to 33% in 1910 to 1970. There is also a fairly large population of refugees living in the city since the 1970s. In fact, nearly 1,600 refugees are said to arrive at George Bush International Airport every year from all over the world. Of course, Houston is a very multicultural city, particularly due to its academic institutions, industry, and status as a port city. In Houston, our residents speak as many or more than 90 languages. And we also have one of the youngest populations in the country due to the influx of immigrants in the state. It is estimated that there are 400,000 undocumented residents living in the Houston area alone. Successful consultants respect and value the many diversities of their collaborators and demonstrate competence in working with diverse populations and contexts. Diversity in educational settings refers to differences in ethnicity, language, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and factors such as socioeconomic level, geography, age, gender, and any other indicators of group uniqueness. The majority of the teaching force does not reflect the diversity of its clients. Limited experiences and familiarity with diversity can impact teacher preparedness and effectiveness. So as educators, we must seek to familiarize ourselves with the complex diversities of our students and their families. The American Psychological Association describes culture as the embodiment of a worldview through learned and transmitted beliefs, values, and practices, and a way of living informed by historical, economic, ecological, and political forces acting on a group. T.L. Cross of the National Indian Child Welfare Association described culture as an organized response to human needs. Food, safety and security, love and belonging, esteem and identity, and self-actualization are shaped by culture. As consulting educators, we may need to ask questions about the meanings of terms used in different educational settings. Consider the following terms that are related to language. English language learner, or ELL. English language development, or ELD. English for speakers of other languages, or ESOL. Cultural and linguistic diversity, CLD, and culturally and linguistically diverse students with exceptionalities, or CLDE. Here in Texas, I most commonly hear the term ELL used to refer to students who are not yet deemed proficient in English. ELD refers to English language development, or all types of instruction that develop oral and written English language skills. Naturally, the phrase minority group is used less today. In fact, groups once considered to be a minority group, such as Hispanic or Latino peoples, has quickly become the majority in places like Texas. The term ethnic group is suggested instead. Race and ethnicity are distinct as defined by the National Center for Educational Statistics. Ethnicity is either Hispanic or Latino or not. Race, on the other hand, can be one or more of the following listed above. Other diversity-related terminology that we will want to be aware of are here. 3 additional related terms to know are underrepresented minority, tolerance, and privilege. The first 2 terms are mostly self-explanatory, so I'll say just a bit about the third term here. The term privilege is used to denote historical, traditional, or experiential status reflecting a dominant social position. You have likely heard of the term white privilege, which refers to the historical and traditional dominance and power of Western European culture in the current American society. Here, the privilege was implicitly granted, was not chosen, but simply comes with the color of the skin. There are other types of privilege that shape educational policies and practices, though. Educators who work with students with disabilities understand the implicit privilege that comes with being able and the implicit disadvantage, lack of power that comes with being differently abled. Social justice is a complex term that relates to equity and multicultural education. It has been defined as creating an equitable and just learning environment for every student and family. Social justice means addressing the axes of social difference, disability, ableism, gender, sexism, age, ageism, sexuality, heterosexism, race, racism, and the intersectionalities of oppression, power, and privilege. Think about the ways that you could develop your own diversity-related competencies. Each of these areas are discussed in more detail. Consider the following as a guiding framework for developing a lens for social justice. 1. Encourage families and communities to look at the bigger picture beyond a single characteristic. 2. Reject deficit thinking that leads to negative assumptions about diverse populations. 3. Recognize that the power of culture makes us relatively oblivious to the limitations of our own perspectives, behaviors, and values. Take just a few minutes to assess your own diversity using the activity on page 288. Here, you'll be encouraged to reflect on your own multiple diversities by thinking about your own culture, family history, and identity groups using some of these questions. First, how would you describe yourself? Here are a few more examples of questions to ask when increasing awareness of one's own multiple diversities. As consultants and co-educators, it is important to remember that we belong to many groups, and these groups aren't always homogeneous. Within diverse groups, there are those who share other factors, such as country of origin, religion, etc. So do take just a few minutes to assess your own attitudes and practices using the assessment on page 289. We can cultivate our appreciation and understanding for diversity through direct interpersonal contact. Who better to learn from than those from diverse cultures themselves? Respect for differences is a major factor when interacting in schools. Consider the following positive outcomes that come from familiarizing oneself with diversity. 1. Consider the strengths that come with the diversity of experiences, backgrounds, histories, and cultures of various collaborators on their teams. Next, use technology in ways that are sensitive to cultural and individual differences. Next, develop a critical understanding of the social cultural context of interactions and instruction in the setting, and allow this understanding to guide your work. Promote a positive cultural identity, because all cultures add value to schools and to society and are a powerful resource for group members. Develop multicultural connections in the school area. And finally, prepare for and facilitate collaborative relationships among team members in a changing climate. Consultants will want to avoid negative words and instead use language that indicates a desire to help students expand their abilities. As educators of students with special needs, we must exercise caution in discussing poor work, bad behavior, or poor attitudes. What is perceived as mild criticism or simply a suggestion in one culture may lead to severe punishment of the child or disillusionment about the student's ability from a family of another culture. Gendered language also affects interactions. A few examples and guidelines on gender language are: use the term persons or women and men, not just men or mankind. Avoid saying female doctor or male nurse. Simply say doctor or nurse. Don't avoid recognizing same-sex partnerships. Same-sex partners are typically referred to as partner rather than significant other. Say students or class instead of boys and girls. Consultants have an instrumental role in bringing together diverse groups of educators, including teachers, administrators, related services personnel, families, and community members. We use communication and collaboration skills to help the educational team address and resolve problems and work to create solutions. When considering cultural and linguistic diversity within the team, consultants will want to keep an open mind about cultural characteristics. They are not a one-size-fits-all. Educators will want to respond to individuals and refrain from making assumptions based on cultural characteristics. Educators can and should anticipate working with a variety of family structures. Savvy consultants are aware that their team members may identify as LGBTQ and choose ways of communicating and interacting that are sensitive to differences. Next, we'll look at 8 concrete ways that educators can work to establish collaborative relationships that demonstrate an understanding about a student's out-of-school context. 1. Examine their personal beliefs and feelings about individuals who identify as LGBTQ. 2. Examine their personal beliefs and feelings about families and family diversity in all of its many facets. 3. Understand the consultant's role is not to approve or disapprove of sexual and gender diversity, but to team effectively with all to produce positive outcomes for children. 4. Refer to families or parents rather than mothers and fathers. 5. Refuse to tolerate harassment and use of homophobic teasing, just as racist remarks and behavior are not tolerated. 6. Model and teach respect for all. 7. Reconsider special event parent-focused activities. Emphasizing a stereotypical Father's Day or mother-daughter breakfast may stigmatize children in homes with gay or lesbian parents. 8. Learn about community resources for LGBT identified individuals. Consultants can expect that at least 15% of adults with whom they interact will have a disability. Educators who have disabilities can serve as an inspiration for children who also have challenges. As educators, we must expect that many of the home co-educators with whom we work may have disabilities. Finding the strengths in both kids and adults is critical for effective collaboration. Though we are located in a robust and thriving metropolis, 9% of the nation's students are said to attend rural schools, which can result in geographic isolation or cultural isolation. Student services can be impacted because there are too few students for some kinds of grouping and too few staff to cover vast curricular and special programs. Rural schools also experience high levels of poverty. As many as 20% of the U.S. population moves each year, so educators will want to anticipate the following. Student records aren't always forwarded on time, or in some cases at all. Students who have disabilities must start over in making friends who accept them. Home life is disrupted by parents adjusting to new jobs and circumstances. And finally, parents and team members are subject to the stresses experienced. A military family has its own unique dynamics and lifestyle factors that need to be recognized by educators. Children from military families move and change school districts 6 to 9 times before graduating from high school. This is 3 times higher than civilian families. Consultants must also recognize the challenges associated with military members who are reintegrating with their families and communities after serving overseas. Migrant families face many of the same challenges as rural and poor families. These families frequently experience discrimination because of race, mobility, migrant status, and language. These characteristics could impact parental involvement, such as attending school events or responding to teacher requests. However, educators should not assume that these parents do not value education as much as other parents do. In 2001, about 15% of people living in the United States were living in poverty, and in our area, this figure may be even higher. Hunger is an enormous challenge faced by many of our students, which can and does have a significant impact on a children's ability to learn. Though we may not be able to personally end hunger in our community, there are other ways in which we can support and assist these families. Consider this example. Many of our students who receive free and reduced meals at school are likely experiencing significant food shortages in their home and community. And as staff, we must remain mindful to this struggle. Personally, I have witnessed students being rushed through their breakfast or not receiving it because their parents were late or were told to throw away their milk and breakfast before they could finish and hurry to class. I encourage educators to put themselves instead in the shoes of these children and to adopt a social justice approach. Some families you will encounter are homeless or close to becoming homeless. These families may live in motels, shelters, in their car, or on couches or floors of friends and relatives. Homelessness sometimes results in the family being split up, and some youth may flee their homes due to drug, physical, or sexual abuse. Children who are homeless are guaranteed a free, appropriate education by the McKinney Homeless Assistance Act of 1987. Consultants who work with these families and students will want to learn about local area community services and organizations that serve to support these families and unaccompanied youth. A relatively small amount, or just about 3% of school-age kids, are homeschooled. Consultants will want to understand the family motivations for homeschooling, as well as the laws involving school responsibilities for providing services for these students. And lastly, we'll talk about the social justice framework for collaboration, consultation, and teamwork. A social justice framework guides the way consultants think about and relate to their educational partners. It guides a critical shift in the way one views the world and one's relationship to others. Consultants who view collaboration through a social justice framework recognize the social and political structures that offer support or deny access to education, power, and opportunities for students and collaborators. Intersectionality describes the recognition of multiple identities and their interactions. As such, no one is defined by a single factor or characteristic. When consultants expand recognition to multiple factors, they are better able to see the whole person with their strengths and positive experiences. This concludes the lecture for Chapter 8.